Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of today's video, you can tell that this is going to be my November wrap up. And honestly, y'all, this was kind of a mixed bag for me. This reading month was very, very random. I feel like compared to other reading months that I've had, I did read about 7 books, which isn't great, but it also isn't the worst. I like to read more than that, but because of my job, I do work a 9 to 5. It's just not conducive to my lifestyle to read 30 books a month. I wish I could. And I'm jealous of the girlies that do, but like that's just not me. Audiobooks do help me quite a bit, but like it's still just not realistic for me to even hit that number, you know? So yeah, but like I said, I did read about 7 books here, and I think because I participated in Nonfiction November, it took a little bit longer for me to get through some of these books, because when it comes to those and classics, I feel like slow and steady wins the race, and I feel like you should really try to retain the information that you're reading from these nonfiction books, you know? So yeah, but anyways, I'm gonna break this down into categories. I'm gonna try to really organize these videos a bit better and structure them. So I'm gonna start out with thrillers because I only read 1 thriller this month. I know, crazy, right? And then I read mostly nonfiction and then romance. So that's how we're gonna do it for this video. I will leave timestamps in the description box below, so make sure you check those out if you're looking for them. But yeah, anyways, let's get started. So the first and only thriller that I read for this month is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and this story follows a couple named the Wrights, appropriately named Mr. and Mrs. Wright, and they actually went this weekend getaway to this abandoned church in Scotland. And this abandoned church is actually converted into like this Airbnb type of situation, so that's why they're staying in this abandoned church. And like I mentioned, it is in the middle of nowhere. It's really isolated. There's also like a blizzard / snowstorm happening while they're staying in this church, and why they're on this trip is honestly to save their marriage. Their marriage is crumbling, and the only way that they figure that they can actually save it is by going to this getaway trip and really trying to focus on each other and focus on the issues at hand and really figure out what is the root cause of, you know, the obliteration of their marriage essentially. So part of the reason why their marriage is failing is because the husband, Adam, actually has a condition where he has face blindness, so he cannot really make out any like facial features on anybody. So if you walk past him, he would not be able to recognize you. He can only really recognize people by their hair or by like the perfume that they wear or the cologne that they wear, and just certain other features, like I think like body language and stuff like that. So that's really the only way he can really identify people. And because of this condition, the wife feels very she doesn't feel like Adam is paying enough attention to her because he has this condition. So she just feels very lonely, very neglected, and it's really putting a, you know, hindrance on their marriage, which isn't really fair to Adam because he cannot control this, but you know, that is a whole other situation. But other on this trip, they start to realize that weird things are starting to happen, and they start to realize that maybe they're not alone on this trip, and the story pretty much takes off from there. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This book was phenomenal. Like, it's very short, but don't be fooled by the length because this packed an intense punch. Gabby Reese talks about this book all the time and talks about how there's plot twist after plot twist after plot twist when you get towards the end, and my girl is absolutely right, okay? This book had so many what the F moments and so many like, oh my gosh, like did that really just happen moments, and I could not put it down. I could not put this book down. I kept wanting to know what was happening, what was going on, and I kept trying to, of course, play detective and figure out like why the Wrights are really on this getaway trip, and if there's somebody else or something else with them on this trip, and I didn't figure anything out until I got to the end. I was completely mind blown. Alice Feeney's writing style is just so good. It's so creepy, it's so poetic, it's so heartbreakingly beautiful, but everything just tied up together so nicely in the end. And the last chapter, chef's kiss. It was so creepy, so spooky. It definitely had you reflecting and pondering on some of the earlier moments within the book, and I just love that. I love when authors give you a minute where you're kind of like, wait a minute, so maybe the legend is true, like, you know what I mean? It's just, it was good, it was great. So yeah, I thought this was phenomenal, and I definitely cannot wait to read more by Alice Feeney. I know that this is actually going to be turned into a Netflix adaptation. I don't know if it's going to be like a show or a movie, but Alice Feeney has been in talks with Netflix to turn this into something. I cannot wait to see this on Netflix. I really hope that they keep it as true to the book as possible, just because there also is like a spooky element to this, and I really want that like to be reflected into the show. So yeah, I cannot wait to see that. But yes, definitely pick this up if you haven't already. Like, believe the hype. I know we say this, I know as booktubers and bookstagrammers, etc., say this about like most of these popular books, but like this one in particular, if you love thrillers, if you love psychological thrillers and plot twists, like multiple plot twists within a story, you definitely will like this one. It was really good, and like I said, it is very short. So moving on to the next category, which is nonfiction, and like I mentioned earlier, I did participate in Nonfiction November, and that challenge is hosted by a book Olive, so I will leave her video and her channel link down below in case you're interested in watching the video. And essentially the goal of this challenge is to just read one nonfiction read a month, and I read 3. So I'm really proud of myself. 2 of them were memoirs because I love memoirs. I'm very nosy. I like to see and learn about the lives people lived. But the first memoir that I did read was The Meaning of Mariah Carey by Mariah Carey. And so this memoir follows Mariah Carey's upbringing and how she broke into the entertainment industry, and then of course how she navigated all of that and kind of how it shaped her into the woman she is today. And I actually listened to this via audiobook and on Audible, and I definitely recommend going that route because Mariah Carey narrates it herself, and it was phenomenal. And I think because I listened to the audiobook, that is what prompted me to give this 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good, you guys. I originally started reading this and I was into it, but when I listened to that audiobook, that's how I knew it was going to be great. Because y'all know, if you don't know, I'm a huge Mariah Carey fan. But if you guys don't know, Mariah Carey does do a bit of voice acting, and she just put on a performance, darling. She put on a performance. She threw shade. We still don't know her. She just did so much in this audio like narration, and I loved it. She's so funny, like effortlessly funny, but also just very charming and charismatic. And I just always have been a big fan of MC. Like, she is just a lyrical genius. Her voice is just beautiful, and her pen, nobody can dispute her pen, okay? Like, Mariah knows good music, and she knows what she's doing. But yes, this book was also very heartbreaking though, honestly. Like, I will say her childhood and her upbringing was rough. And of course, you know, we don't know these celebrities personally, but I just didn't expect for Mariah to talk about how troubling her childhood was. I didn't, you know, really, I guess, really think about that, just because Mariah seems very private, I guess, you know, and she doesn't really share that much with her fans. Like, she does share a lot, but she doesn't share, like, you know, the hard times, I feel like. And so to really hear her candidly talk about what she was going through growing up as a biracial girl in her neighborhood, but also dealing with Tommy Mottola and his BS, it was just really crazy. And I felt for her. I raged for her. I laughed with her. I got teary-eyed for her, and I choked up for her because she went through so much. And I'm not going to get into everything, just because you definitely should just pick this up and read it for yourself and let Mariah tell it in her own words. That is the whole point of a memoir, is for the person that is writing it to take back the narrative and to take back, you know, their control and their story and share it with the world the way that they want to. So I definitely recommend picking this up if you're interested in really learning more about, you know, what she talked about in terms of identity, race, and culture, and how it was growing up with a white mother and a black father. And also, again, talking about her tumultuous relationship with Tommy Mottola and how that relationship affected her musical career and almost really, like, destroyed it in a sense. I'm so glad that, you know, she persevered and she made it through, and we got the Emancipation of Mimi, which is, again, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, comeback album of all time. Argue with your mom, not me. So yes, definitely recommend listening to the audiobook for this one though. I think that she did a phenomenal job narrating the story and giving it a life. Like, it felt like you were having a conversation with MC. Next book that I listened to on audiobook via Libby, and this is also a memoir, and it is Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness by Susanna Cahalan. And this is a story about a young woman named Susanna Cahalan, who used to be, I think she actually is now, maybe again, but at the time she was a journalist for the New York Times, and she was, you know, living a fairly normal life. She lived in New York. She had a great, you know, relationship with her boyfriend. She also had a great relationship with her family, and she had a great job. Like, she was living life, she was thriving, right? And then one day things just started to take a turn, and she started to have health problems, and they started to spiral out of control. And essentially what happened is Susanna had this disease called anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, and basically this just means that your brain is attacking itself, essentially, aka brain on fire. So at first doctors did not know what was going on with Susanna. This disease was affecting her speech. It was affecting her, you know, cognitive learning and dissonance. It was affecting everything. She essentially went from, like I said, being, you know, able-bodied person to not being abled anymore. And it was just so heartbreaking to see how she went from that to this in such a short amount of time. And so it pretty much just talks about, like I said, what she was going through during her month of madness, essentially, and how she recovered from it. So I didn't give this an official rating, just because I feel like when it comes to nonfiction pieces that I don't feel 100% connected to, or that I don't give a 5 out of 5 star rating to, I'm not going to officially rate it, just because it's like, who am I to, like, rate or judge someone's story in that way, you know. But I did enjoy the story overall, and I do understand why it's critically acclaimed. This book has saved countless lives because of the story Susanna Cahalan told. So many people showed this book or have given this book or the articles that, you know, talked about this book to their surgeons and doctors when they were experiencing similar symptoms to this disease Susanna was suffering from, and their doctors, like, you know, tested them for it, and it turns out that they had the same exact thing and it saved their lives. So because of that, Susanna, like I said, her story has made an impact, and I really enjoyed the larger discussions that came from this, because Susanna talks about how women and minorities in particular are not taken seriously when they are suffering from health issues, whether that is physical or emotional or mentally. We don't get taken seriously. A lot of the time some doctors will say like, oh, you know, you're just stressed, or you're just partying too hard, or you're just drinking too much, etc. When in reality, no, like, she was suffering from something that was literally life-threatening, very fatal. And her original doctor was one of the main ones telling her family that she's just partying too much, she's drinking too much, she'll be fine. And her parents kept saying she doesn't drink, like, she doesn't really drink that much, she doesn't even party, like, she has a job, she's a journalist, like, she's not doing any of that type of stuff. And he wasn't trying to hear it. He kept dismissing them, kept saying like, you know, it's fine, downplaying the situation, until Susanna had an awful seizure that almost ended her life. And then finally they removed that doctor from her case, and then she got a new doctor, and this doctor gave her a fighting chance and was able to identify what was actually wrong with Susanna. And his name is Dr. Suhail Nahar. So remember that name. But yes, this was a great read though, nonetheless. Like, I'm not really into like medical memoirs and nonfiction pieces, just because I get really freaked out when, you know, when these books talk about how our bodies and our minds can turn on us in an instant. That really scares me. And I know that's not a good excuse to not read these type of books, but like, it freaks me out. So I try to stay away from them, but I wanted to read this for a long time, and I know that this is also a major motion picture film starring Chloe Grace Moretz. So I just wanted to pick this up and give it a read, and like I said, I really enjoyed it. It definitely has a lot of medical jargon in it, so I definitely recommend listening to the audiobook. And honestly, the narrator for the audiobook, she did a great job, I'm not gonna lie. She made it so much more emotional than what I feel like it maybe originally was, just because she did different voices, and even the way that she emulated Susanna's thoughts as she was going through this, it was so haunting and so sad. It was so sad because, like I said, she went from being able-bodied to not anymore, and it was just scary how nobody was able to figure out what was actually going on with her, and for her to almost lose her life because of the ignorance of certain professionals. This could have turned out very differently. Had she been taken seriously from the start, this could have probably turned out very differently. But nonetheless, I'm glad that she made a full recovery and that she's able to tell her story, and this story was able to help other people and save their lives. So yes, definitely recommend checking out the audiobook for this as well. I think it's about only like 8 to 10 hours, and I got through it pretty quickly in a day's work. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. It was very sad though, so I will say that. Look up trigger warnings. There is some graphic, you know, content in here, just because it is like in the medical sphere and the healthcare sphere, but still an important read nonetheless. So the last nonfiction book that I read for the month is The Woman Who Would Be King, Hatshepsut's Rise to Power in Ancient Egypt by Kara Cooney. And this is pretty much a biography of King Hatshepsut / I want to say the 6th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty in ancient Egypt. So King Hatshepsut, sorry, let me put some respect on her name. King Hatshepsut actually was and still is the most successful female ruler of ancient Egypt, even beating out Cleopatra. So I thought that this book was actually really interesting. I did not give this an official rating just because there were some repetitive things in this book, and I don't think that's to the fault of Kara Cooney or other Egyptologists who have helped piece this book together. And I want to say that's because a lot of the information that are presented in these books that focuses on the pharaohs, so King Hatshepsut, King Tut, Nefertiti, Cleopatra, etc., a lot of the times, you know, this information isn't like hearsay, but a lot of it is circumstantial at best, just because a lot of the documentation from that time period has either been lost or was just never recorded in the first place. And so I don't want to give it an official rating, but I did enjoy the story for what it was. I picked this book up off of a whim. My library actually had it, but I saw another booktuber mention this video in her Nonfiction November TBR video, and I wish I could remember her name, but she mentioned this book and I was like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. I was definitely one of those kids who was obsessed with ancient Egypt growing up. I wanted to go to the King Tut Museum / exhibit so badly, and my parents refused every time because it was really expensive, but I wanted to go, and I fell in love with ancient Egypt, to be honest. And I learned so much about King Hatshepsut that I did not learn in school. Of course, we learned about Cleopatra and King Tut, but like we don't really get to hear about King Hatshepsut, and we really should, because my girl was really ruling and running ish. Like she really did the thing, like the damn thing. I loved that it was able to give a voice in a story and a potential face to the name, and now I know how to pronounce her name correctly and I know who she is now. And that was like one of the points of the story that Cara Cooney wanted to tell, was that, you know, how can this woman be one of the most successful rulers that ancient Egypt ever saw, yet we can't even pronounce her name? And I just thought that was a really good point. So I'm really glad that this book shed some light on her, or what she might have been like and what her thoughts were, you know, as she was ruling as king. And I just really appreciated that Cara Cooney went further by posing thought-provoking questions. Again, a lot of this is circumstantial, so we don't really know for sure, but I like how she posed these questions of, you know, I wonder what King Hatshepsut was thinking when she, you know, took the crown, when she was able to step into this role as king. I wonder if she was, you know, did she have a short temper, or was she handling things with, like, you know, grace and compassion? Like, I just like that she was presenting all of these questions to us and having the reader ask themselves that too, because I was also wondering, like, I wonder how it was to be king as a woman during that time period, you know? And it's really a shame and unfortunate that her legacy has been altered and forever tampered with, because a lot of her statues and obelisks that she had built during her reign were purposefully destroyed by her nephew. Actually, they were purposefully destroyed. Any monuments or images that depicted King Hatshepsut as king were destroyed because patriarchy and misogyny won again. So I really hate that for her, but I'm really hoping that this book and other works will come out in the future, so that way we can continue to talk about King Hatshepsut and give her the recognition that she deserves. Because at the end of the day, she was a woman who had her own dreams and ambitions, and like I said, misogyny and the patriarchy was not letting that happen. So it's really unfortunate, but I'm so glad that she was able to rule, whatever the circumstances were. I'm so glad that she was able to rule, and ancient Egypt was able to see a powerful woman such as King Hatshepsut step into this role and do what she had to do for her country. You could tell, at least through, you know, the evidence and the information that was presented in the book, that she always put her country first. She always put Egypt first, and she always made sure that she had Egypt's best interest at heart. And, you know, love that for her. So yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy this book. I thought it was really interesting, and I do plan on reading more ancient Egypt type of books, because like I said, I loved that growing up as a kid. And I really would like to read more about Cleopatra herself next, as well as Nefertiti, etc. I want to read about all of the female rulers, but I'm glad I got to start out with King Hatshepsut, and that, again, we're starting to give her the recognition that she rightfully deserves. So the next 3 books and the last category of this video is romance. So yes, I did read 3 romance books this month, and the first one that I started off with was While We Were Dating by Jasmine Guillory, and this is actually about a woman named Anna Gardiner, who is an actress, and she's trying to get her next Oscar win. I think she was actually nominated for an Oscar, but she lost, so now she's trying to, you know, lick her wounds, get her bearings in order, so that way she can, like, audition for more high profile roles, so that way she can finally win that Oscar that she was snubbed for. And then on the flip side, it also follows Ben Stevens, who is actually a main character in the whole Jasmine Guillory, like, wedding date romance universe. He is Theo's brother, if you guys, you know, have read the books. But Ben is an advertising executive, and he actually has to put together a pitch / a campaign to work with Anna for this, like, cell phone brand or something like that. And so that's how they get to meet, and sparks start to fly, and the story pretty much takes off from there. And so I did rate this a 3 out of 5 stars, which is not great, because I love Jasmine Guillory's romance books. I'm one of the few that actually really enjoys her romance, like, wedding date series. The Wedding Date is one of my favorite romance books of all time, and I also really enjoy The Proposal, as well as the, oh my goodness, what was that, the wedding party, I think it was. The Wedding Party with Maddie and Theo, so Ben's brother. I really enjoyed all of those books, honestly, but this one missed the mark for me just a bit. I felt like the characters were very underdeveloped. I don't think that we got to know more about Ben or Anna in particular, but starting with Ben, because he's already in the Wedding Date series universe, I just thought we would have got a little bit more from him, and I thought we would have really got to know him a bit better, like we did with Theo and like we did with even Drew and Carlos, but we didn't. I felt like it was kind of surface level how we got to know Ben. And usually I'm the type to suspend disbelief for any and all like books that require it, especially romance and thrillers. I always suspend disbelief just because like you have to, because if you don't, you're not gonna have fun reading it. But I could not get past some of the things that Ben said and did, because like, you know for a fact most men would not say what Ben said or did. So I don't know, I just felt that part, like some of the things that he said, like his dialogue was a bit cringy and sometimes just very unrealistic. And Anna, going to her, she was also underdeveloped, and I felt like she was written in that generic like actress written in a book way. But I did like her character a bit more than Ben's. I felt like she actually had like, I don't know, like a mission, honestly. Like I felt like she was really trying to combat the harmful stereotypes and stigmas and connotations placed on Black women in the entertainment industry, especially plus size Black women. She was really trying her hardest to not let that affect her, and I really love that type of representation that Jasmine was able to give to Anna's character, you know. But overall, it just wasn't my favorite JG read, but she's still an auto-buy author for me, and I'm still going to buy any romance book that she writes. She's actually coming out with one next year, so I will be picking that up. But yeah, this one just kind of missed the mark for me. I felt like this was just kind of forgettable, but you know, I don't know. It started off strong too. That's the other thing. It started off really strong, and I really thought I was going to give this a 5 stars. And then as we got to the middle and the end, it just started to drag, and it just started to get a little like boring, I'm not gonna lie. But like the beginning was really good. And it really focused on Ben and his career as an advertising exec. And for those of you who do not know, I do work in the communications industry, similar to Ben. So I love that type of like representation. I felt seen, and JG went into it a bit further and really tried to like shine a light on how Black creatives in the comms industry, you know, feel and what we have to go through at times, especially being the only Black person in these meetings or at the table. Like I just really liked how she went into that a bit further. But other than that, like, yeah, this was kind of forgettable, but you know, you can't win them all. The next romance book that I read was The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and this is about 2 people named Shay and Dominic. So Shay has been working at this radio station for years. Like she has like pretty much worked her way up from intern all the way up to like I think senior producer. And then on the flip side, you have Dominic, who just got out of grad school, and now he's really trying to, you know, learn everything he can about journalism and really like start to put his degrees to use. And him and Shay both work at this radio station. Unfortunately, the radio station is experiencing like budget cuts, and like the revenue isn't just what it used to be back in the day, because of course everybody is turning to, you know, podcasts and, you know, all this other type of stuff. So they're really struggling. Like the local news is really struggling. So their producer, their like manager slash general manager slash like producer is like has like this brainstorming meeting where they're trying to figure out ways to save the station. And Shay, kind of like being sarcastic, comes up with this whole like, why don't we have like a dating show, or like why don't we have like a relationship like podcast type of show where 2 exes give like relationship advice and like talk about how the relationship failed. Well, everybody loves the idea, so they decide to go with that, and the general manager decides to choose Shay and Dominic to lead the talk show. And this is for a reason, and the reason is because Shay and Dominic hate each other. They cannot stand each other. Shay thinks that Dominic is very full of himself. She feels like he thinks he knows everything, and she feels like he's kind of a mains planner. And then on the flip side of that, Dominic is just like not, he doesn't really understand, like, first of all, why Shay really doesn't care for him, but he also kind of looks at Shay in a, I don't want to say he looks down on her, but he kind of looks at her in a way of like, you've been working here for years and you're only just a senior producer, like you should be more than that. So like they have a lot of tension, a lot of friction between them. So that's why like their producer slash manager feels as though it would be better for them to lead the show. And as the story goes on, you start to see that Shay and Dom are both very good at what they do, and they're really good at having this talk show, and the story pretty much takes off from there. I did give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought that this book was really good in terms of just showing, again, representation for the comms industry. I really enjoyed the whole journalistic aspect of this. I thought Rachel Lynn Solomon did a great job at showing how detrimental, you know, lying in the comms industry, specifically journalism, can be for somebody in their career. I was on edge the entire time for Shay and Dominic, because if their secret got out that they were lying, they would be finished. Like that's how it is in this industry. Like moral and integrity and ethics is everything. You even have to like recite slash and or learn the code of ethics in journalism. At least at Penn State, we had to like really look into that, and I'm assuming other journalism programs do that as well. But yeah, I was like on the edge of my seat for both of them when it came to that. But in terms of the actual story itself, I thought it was really cute. I really enjoyed it. I loved Shay. Shay was like one of my faves. I loved how she was very outspoken about misogyny in the workplace, and how she was outspoken about, you know, it's not fair that a lot of us women have to like work, you know, crazy like this and not see the reward and the payoff that like our male counterparts get. So I really enjoyed how she was very outspoken about that. There was also a lot of discussions on ageism and aging out of this field, and Shay is a bit older than Dominic, so I really enjoy that aspect as well. And then for Dominic, honestly y'all, I wasn't seeing it for him in the beginning, because Shay was right. He was a mansplainer through and through. He was gaslighting the hell out of Shay, and I did not like that. I did not appreciate that. And I love the enemies to lovers trope, but I just felt like Dominic was a little bit too much in the beginning. He kept reminding everybody that he got degrees. He has like a bachelor's degree and a master's, and it's like, that's cute, we get it, but like, I'm pretty sure everybody else at the station also has degrees, sir. Like, you know what I mean? So he just kept harping on that, so it was kind of annoying. I'm not saying you can't brag, I'm not saying you can't, you know, flex or whatever, but like, he was doing a little bit too much. So I wasn't really vibing with him in the beginning, but as the story went on, of course, he started to like, you know, let go of all of that and really started to see how he wasn't the most likable person. And you know, I felt like he had a good redemption arc is what I'm trying to say. The middle and the ending of this book, a mess. It was a hot mess, but I say that with the utmost respect, and I feel like I say that in a good way too. Like, I love mess when it comes to my romance books, and it was messy. Like, it was kind of a shit show towards the end of the book, and I really hated Shay and Dominic's manager, the one that like set up this whole show. I hate him. I don't see it for him. So yeah, I really did not like his character either, and I know like he wasn't really like you know, a main character like Shay and Dominic, but like, he still had his roles and his scenes in the book, and I just felt like we could have did less with him. I did not like him, but other than that, I thought the book was great. I thought it was a really great read. I felt like it didn't just focus on the romance, it actually focused on character development as well. You really start to see Shay and Dominic grow from the first page all the way into the end, because they both have flaws that they have to work on together and individually, and I just really liked how everything tied you know, together in the end. I thought Solomon did a great job, and I heard she's coming out with a new book next year called Weather Girl, so I cannot wait to read that one, and I think it's another calm setting, so I need to look her up. I need to look up my girl Miss Solomon, because I don't know if she's like an original like journalist or something, but she knew a lot about like the journalism industry, and I was so fascinated reading it, and like, you could tell she knew what she was talking about. So I needed to look into her and her biography, but I loved her writing style. I thought she was very funny, very witty. Shay and Dominic reminded me of January and Gus and Beach Read, and I loved that book. That was one of my favorite romance books of this year. So if you like Beach Read, I feel like you would like this, just because Shay and Dominic's banter and like wittiness reflects and is very similar to Gus and January's like banter. So I think that was another reason why I liked it. Okay, so the last book that I read for the month of November was a romance book, and it was Ramona Julieta by Alana Quintana Albertson, and this was gifted to me in exchange for an honest review from Berkeley Publishing Group as well as NetGalley, so thank you to them. And I'm just gonna read the synopsis here because this book doesn't come out until February of next year, but right here it says, when fate and tacos bring Ramona Julieta together on the Day of the Dead, the star-crossed pair must make a choice: accept the bitter food rivalry that drives them apart, or surrender to a love that consumes them. Ramon Montez always achieves his goals, whether that means collecting Ivy League degrees or growing his father's fast food empire. Nothing sets Ramon off course. So when the sexy señorita who kissed him on the Day of the Dead runs off into the night with his heart, he determines to do whatever it takes to find her again. Celebrity chef Julieta Campos has sacrificed everything to save her seat-to-table taquillera from closing. To her horror, she discovers that her new landlord is none other than the magnetic mariachi she hooked up with on Dia de los Muertos. Even worse, it was his father who stole her mother's taco recipe decades ago. Julieta has no choice but to work with Ramon, the man who destroyed her life's work and the one man who tempts and inspires her. As San Diego's outraged community protests against the Taco King takeover and the divide between their family grows, Ramon and Julieta struggle to balance the rising tensions. But Ramon knows that true love is priceless, and despite all of his successes, this is the one battle he refuses to lose. So I just thought that this sounded so cute from the synopsis, and when I first saw this on NetGalley, like, I knew I had to request for it, and I was approved, and I was really happy. So this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, if you couldn't tell. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and honestly, y'all, I absolutely loved it. First, I want to start off with like the atmospheric tone of this story. Robertson did a great job at capturing like authentic Mexican traditions and culture and the food. This heavily focuses on tacos and, you know, the food aspect, and I was so hungry reading this. She did such a good job at like really showing how like good authentic Mexican food is, honestly. And there was just other different foods that were incorporated throughout the story as well, such as tamales, taquilleros, etc. And they were just, I wanted to eat everything. And then moving on to, like I said, the actual like culture itself and the tradition. So because this book focuses on Dia de los Muertos, it just does such a great job at really showing how beautiful and heartbreaking the holiday really is. And I feel like we don't get that many books that really focus on that holiday, which is really sad because it's so beautiful when you think of the concept of it. It's essentially about you welcoming your deceased loved ones back to earth, to spend time with them, to honor them, and you know, to just wish them well in this next chapter, you know, that they're in right now, if you know, believe in the traditions and the culture and all of that type of stuff, and in the holiday itself. I just thought it was beautifully done, and we got to learn a lot more about the holiday, and I just feel like this is going to be a really great segue for American audiences and other audiences that don't really know too much about the holiday, and getting them to learn more about it. I just thought it was great. So the colors that she described in it, like the actual music itself, it just all sounded like a great celebration, and I loved it. Moving on to Ramon and Julieta, starting with Ramon. Ramon I thought was great. I loved both of them, but I thought Ramon was great. Honestly, he starts off, of course, as this like shrewd, greedy businessman, and then towards the end of the story, he turns into this very loving and just romantic guy that deserves Julieta, and I loved him towards the end of the story. In particular, he just starts to get like a moral compass and everything, and it's just great. Robertson did a great job at showing how it can be to be a sellout, essentially, because that was what Ramon was. In a sense, she really emphasized the message of like, it's important to stay true to yourself and to your roots and to your community, and to not destroy it by gentrification or anything like that. I thought, you know, this book has so many real life and real world themes. Moving on to Julieta's character, I loved her deeply. You could tell that she just wanted to be loved, and she really wanted to have a worthwhile relationship with someone other than her family, of course, because that was really the only bond and relationships that she had was with her family. But I'm really glad that we got to see her branch out and venture out and become more confident and comfortable with herself in terms of just like being in a relationship with someone, especially someone like Ramon, because they come from two very different backgrounds. Ramon is very successful, very rich, very wealthy, where Julieta has to work. She has to work every single day to maintain her restaurant and her business, and to make sure that her and her mother don't go bankrupt. So there definitely is that Romeo and Juliet aspect of, like I said, the rival families, just different backgrounds, even the names, as you hear, Julieta Campos, Ramon Montez, just like Romeo, what is it, Montague, and Juliet Capulet or something like that. I loved it. And then just kind of going, I'm trying to get like all my thoughts together, like I said, by looking at my review. So moving on to my final thoughts, I will say that the romance is very insta love, and that's honestly because it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. If you ever read the original play, it is of course very insta love. They're actually teenagers, so it's even more insta lovey, but in this retelling, Ramon and Julieta are both, I think, in their 30s, so there is a lot more maturity behind them, and there's a lot more rationale and a lot more critical thinking that's like developed within the story. But like there's still, of course, those like Romeo and Juliet elements like I mentioned. But overall, I thought that this was a beautiful love story. Now it honestly makes me want to read the original Romeo and Juliet play again. I want to give it a try to see if I actually will like it now as an adult versus when I read it as a teenager in English class. So yeah, the book did what it had to do, and I really appreciated it, and I can't wait until it comes out. I don't think it comes out until February. Let me double check. NetGalley actually publishes on February 1st, 2022, and we're in depth Bookstagram review as it gets closer to the actual publishing date. So I will link my Bookstagram down below, and it will be mentioned at the end of the video. So please make sure you follow me and, you know, stick around and see what I post about this book, but all of the books that I read in particular. If you want to learn more about like my thoughts in real time, that's where I'm the most active. So yes, definitely check out my Bookstagram. All right, y'all, and those are all of the books that I read for the month of November. Like I mentioned, I feel like this was a pretty mixed reading month. I did enjoy the books that I read, but I didn't enjoy them as much as I didn't enjoy most of them as much as I did last month. I read only 4- and 5-star books last month, and this month it was, like I said, kind of a mixed bag, a hodgepodge of ratings, but you know, you can't win them all, so yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know what books you read for the month of November. Let me know if you participated in a nonfiction November at all, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!